Okay. What do you think? Pretty cool.
Yeah, I wasn't with Owl. I still didn't have it, so, but because I wasn't when I was super young. But I already did one of those tours at Auschwitz within the same technology. And
Oh my, yeah.
because I mean Auschwitz is good. Russians, but it's crazy to see where everything stood, and they got a pretty like if you stand far enough, like put it exact right spot. It looks like you're looking for like some magnifying glasses and or some binoculars and just see more. So it's pretty cool. Of course, Auschwitz was a little heavy on the topic, so you kind of have a tough time enjoying it. Like appreciate the whole experience because of course you always kind of dealing with something a little heavier. So I'd imagine the Acropolis would probably be a lot cooler since it's a crazy historical site. And, it's a pretty big monument.
Yes. And I didn't know about Auschwitz. In fact, I just recently found out about this technology on the Acropolis. And there's another there's an app. It's called Sketchfab. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. You can look it up. And it's free on the App Store. But it takes single objects and turns them into 3D. So you could take search for the Venus of Willendorf, and you could kind of look at the back, look at it from the top or the bottom, and so on. So yeah, this 3D technology is amazing. And on top of which, the scholars, this has all been approved. This University of Athens, they've been the pretty much the experts on the Acropolis. And so the first thing I think that I don't know, first thing I noticed was how many statues adorned the buildings. They're all over the place. The second thing I noticed was that they were painted. And so anyway, I was doing a little reading on that and been trying to find out exactly what kind of paint they used. And they're not, at least from what I've researched, not exactly sure what kind of paint there is, but they knew there were pigments. And modern technology has allowed them to look at the surfaces of these sculptures and figure out what color they were painted. So a lot of research has gone into the depiction of these statues. And so we think they're pretty accurate. And I want to kind of move up here a little bit. See all of this stuff, that even the low relief that you see on these Greek monuments were painted. All of this was, as you saw, very colorful. And I want to kind of jump into, well, you see, this is basically a picture of what we think. It says here, restored view. And so that's what they did with the entire Acropolis. And as you saw, there were many temples and many buildings. As Andrew was saying, this is huge. And I want to run this up to Greek sculpture. And so Greek sculpture had been the model for Western art for about 2,500 years or so. The Romans adopted the style. They hired Greek sculptors to make their sculpture, and they often copied Greek sculpture. And when we look at the chapter on Rome, you'll see occasionally Roman copy of Greek sculpture. And so anyway, but the transformation from the geometric to the archaic to the classical was a progression. And this is Dying Warrior from the West Pediment Temple of Aegina, Greece. And so we can kind of figure out where this probably was on the pediment. You guys remember what a pediment is? It's that triangular shape above the columns in the front and the rear of the building. And so you can imagine that over on this side was narrower, and that the slope, the pitch of the pediment was probably something like this. Second thing is that they've done a little bit of work here. They drilled a hole in his chest and fashioned this piece of steel to hold up his forearm and hand. And we see that a lot with missing pieces. As you saw the Acropolis, as you saw the Parthenon, a lot of just pieces of things all around. You know, a lot of this had been destroyed over the centuries. And so anyway, but I want to point out this. As compared to most of the sculpture we've seen to date, this is almost exponentially more anatomically correct. And so it's not perfect, but it is pretty good. You can see the rib cage, you can see the bicep and tricep, you can see the pecs, you can see the calf muscles, all of that. That's much more naturalistic than anything we've seen to date. We see the face, and it's not, well, it's not a kind of a standard face. I think that these early classical sculptures, the faces almost are different from one to the next. And finally, I'd like to point out that the hair is stylized, but we don't know if that is an artistic convention as they did, say, in Mesopotamia. We saw all of the beards and they were all braided. Is that an artistic convention? Or is it that they wore their hair in this fashion? Jury's still out on that. But at any rate, this is from 490 BCE, and we're rapidly getting close to the time where we see statues from the Parthenon. Another dying warrior, again, in a lot of ways, much more accurate in its depiction of the human body, and it's not so rigid either in its pose. Would see those Egyptian statues and they would just be standing like this, maybe with one foot forward to indicate that they were moving, but basically they were pretty rigid, looking forward. This guy, he's lying on the ground. He looked like he's wounded, the dying warrior, just like the previous one. You see, This is actually not a standard pose. This is depicts a lot more movement and all of the stress of the muscles and things. They're all much more naturalistic. And so we get this, the Temple of Hera II or Apollo. That gets to another thing. The Parthenon was a temple to Athena. We have temples dedicated to gods. And so this is in Italy too. And that's another thing I want to emphasize is that the connection between ancient Greece and ancient Rome was very deep. Very, they prospered off each other. Greece, at this time, 5th century BCE, Greece was the superpower. But Rome, a friendly ally, a junior partner in this arrangement, and they really took in a lot of Greek ideas and Greek architecture and everything. So this is in Italy. And did I show you guys this last time? All of these neoclassical buildings.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I did. And so here it is, the Parthenon. You see scaffolding and so on. Athena and Hercules and Atlas. The Temple of Zeus. Again, a temple to a god. Not a temple to Ramses II. Not a monument to Khufu. It is a god. So what we have here is this separation, if you will, of church and state. Gods that were prayed to, gods were important, but there were military figures, there were political figures, and then there were religious figures. And so anyway, this is classical. Here's a set of pediment sculptures. And this depicts a chariot race. And again, the degree of naturalism is like really growing almost exponentially. You can see the slope, as I was talking about. They had all of these sculptures designed so that they would fit into that triangular shape. And so this is like huge in scale. Look at that. 87 feet wide. That's pretty significant. Seer from the East Pediment Temple. What we have, a seer, a soothsayer, a prophet, somebody that could see into the future. And that was something that was kind of pervasive in Greek culture too. There were seers, there were oracles, they had a lot of different kinds of rituals to be able to predict the future. It was every day. And so anyway, we got the metal rods to kind of show you where these pieces would be in support. But again, it's got the roll. It's got, he's old. Again, maybe that's the way that beards were actually worn, or maybe it's stylized. But again, the faces are different, the bodies are different, the poses are different, and they get there because they were really interested in the world around them. And so what we have here, can't emphasize this enough, a warrior culture, to be sure. Alexander the Great conquers in the 4th century BCE what the entire known world, what they knew. And so you got these stories, you got these sculptures of Alexander's conquest and places far away like France and all the way to South Asia, all across Turkey, all across Egypt, and so on. Bottom line is that it was an empire and military state on their own, but they also supported the arts and they supported thinking. And unlike previous civilizations, they shared their knowledge, the things that they discovered. And we still use a lot of what they discovered, what they learned today. Geometry, Greek idea. You guys know what it is. It's a way to calculate area and distance and so on. It's about shapes. It's about math. And they invented geometry. We know that Egypt had pretty advanced knowledge of geometry. They couldn't have built the pyramids and all of the monuments without it. But we don't really have the record of their geometry. But the Greeks were actually kind of open with this knowledge. And so we got it. Today, the ideas about medicine, we know it. Philosophy, a Greek idea. Break the word down, it means the love of knowledge. And they shared it with us. And again, the arts, we see the architecture, we're seeing some of the sculpture, we see the pottery, which was in many ways much more small d democratic, because they took a lot of care in decorating their ceramics. But it was shared. It wasn't something that came from the palace. A lot of this stuff was used in people's homes. It was kind of very commonplace. It's very precious and it's certainly very artistic, but bottom line is that they have in effect, when they made their pottery, like pottery factories, pottery workshops. And you'll see a lot of the pottery identified by the workshop or the painter that created the decoration. But that's why we have so much of this, because it wasn't just something you find in a palace or a tomb, but it permeated the entire society. So they were very open. They shared their knowledge, their thinking, and it extended to a lot of things. Literature. They promoted literature. We have the Odyssey and the Iliad. That's like verbatim from, was it 7th, 8th century BCE? Bottom line, reading was something that, and they developed a language and an alphabet that we actually kind of based the modern alphabet. Actually, the Romans adopted it, changed it a little bit, but we're still using it. They built amphitheaters. That is a place that is like a kind of a semicircular, yes.
Just received it. Oh, He's already. Just sent me this message.
Oh, say, I could,
Well, he's already, he just sent me a message. But not being able to.
yeah. Bottom line, this was like Greece is pretty much the foundation for Western civilization in a way that these other cultures weren't. And in part because they were so open with what they did. Theater, for example. What we have today in theater, drama, tragedy, comedy, right out of ancient Greece. And so, yeah, I want to kind of, here we go. This is from the Temple of Zeus. Again, again, much more naturalistic. Krytos boy from the Acropolis. I want to talk a little bit about the painting of these because you see that these are really very naturalistic, but they're marble. This is kind of one of the quirky things in history. The idea that these statues were painted was kind of lost to history. They were lost to history partly because weather rendered all of wore the paint off. They think maybe some overzealous cleaning, but by the mid 12th, 15th centuries, Common Era, everyone that they found was white, had the original marble. And so when we have a revitalized interest in classical Greece and Rome, all of the sculptors create their sculptures, some cast bronze, but mostly out of marble and pristine white marble, and left them like that. Say, for instance, Michelangelo's David, white marble. Had no idea that the originals were actually painted. What we know about the painting too, and this was accurately depicted in the film, is that we believe that the colors were really very strong colors. It wasn't pastel, they were really bold, and I read somebody comment that they thought they were tacky. You make your decision on that, but I think that the video we saw is pretty accurate, strong, bold color. And so anyway, when you look at this stuff, you got to keep that in mind that originally it was painted, which would add to the naturalism. And so here we go. This is from Italy, by the way, but it's cast bronze, and it's a warrior. And again, now it's like this naturalism is just like exploding. All of the pursuits of knowledge in math, medicine, astronomy, geography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was no different in the arts. And so how they portray the anatomy, it almost gets more naturalistic by this time, almost by the decade. And so I was making a lot of comments about the muscles and things, but you can take this guy and you see the abs. You can see everything. And in fact, on the hands, the joints, the large knuckles and things, they really do understand. This is what I was talking about before. Lost wax sculpture, bottom line, this is the white, here is the wax. You pour it in, or you pack it in, and then you pour in the bronze, and this is what you get. And so in this case, they actually have some pins going through here. Basically, what that's about is to make sure everything doesn't shift. Cut those off from the final product. And this is a hollow bronze casting. So when you do the wax model, you stuff the inside with sand as well. Good. Anyway, we talked about it. Charioteer of Delphi. And here we are. This is cast bronze again. So this is, again, I could talk about the naturalism and ideas that faces are very different one to the next. These are the kind of sculptures that you would probably recognize if you would see these people in the home, especially if they were dressed like this. But I'd like to point out something here too, and this is something I've never seen previous to ancient Greece, and that is trying to get the clothing accurate, how it's draped onto the body. And so this all seems to be reasonably pretty accurate. Would you say that? You can look around, you've got everybody. It said clothes fit, you got wrinkles on the sleeves, around the hood. Just saying, bottom line, they were actually looking at that. In fact, they get so good at this that they start to make, there's some more news. Here we go. And this is from the pediment. This is, you see, this is in the British Museum in London. Talked about how the Brits have a lot of the statues. Look at how the folds drape these bodies. And this is kind of what you would call diaphanous clothing. You know what diaphanous means? Means you can see through it. It's very thin, it's very sheer, and you can see the body forms underneath the clothing. Now, you really have to understand what you're looking at and able to carve something like this out of marble. And these are the pediment sculptures. There's some more pediment sculptures. Let me see. Centaur. The south side of the Parthenon. See, we do have many pieces of the Parthenon. Centaur. We talked about these half human, half animal creatures. We saw that in Egypt. There's a number of them, but probably most famously the Anubis. We talked about the Minotaur in Minoan culture in the Aegean. And so we got the centaur, which is a horse and a person. And very fearsome creature to be sure. And you see, he just had, I just killed somebody. It actually looks so like here that they have killed a lion and skinned the lion and has the. Look at the folds. Look at the anatomy. So what we have here is like a really high point. It's what we call the classical Greek period. And it's when we saw much of the Acropolis built, certainly the Parthenon. Let's see. Here we go. I wanted to show you this too. We know that the sculptor here was Phidias. And this is what we think the statue inside the Parthenon looked like. Model of the lost statue. And as I said, a lot of people are painting them and they don't look quite as natural with paint in some cases. But again, this was in the Parthenon. And if you had the 3D glasses, I mean, not the iPad that was showing you virtual reality, this is exactly what you see. And again, you see the low relief along the bottom, all painted. And so anyway, this is all the classical period. And I do want to point out that, you know, as we look through, here's another piece from the British Museum. All of the pediment sculptures seem to be there. And we got this. This is at a number of places. This is from the British Museum, the Acropolis Museum in Athens, and the Louvre. But anyway, my point is that the knowledge that they gained, they were very learned people, and the things they learned applied to their art. And so as the geometry and the physics, the chemistry and everything advances, the art advances as well. And so Pantheonic Festival, this, what that means is that they're many gods. And so this is another temple from the Acropolis. And the other thing is, Andrew was saying, it's huge and it's overlooks the entire city too. You can see this in the distance. It's up very high. You can see a long ways. Sculptures used as columns. And so there's a close-up. The Acropolis Museum and the British Museum. And what I want to get to here, and you know, it gives us a pretty clear picture of what they believed, what was important to them, what they knew. But I want to kind of get to this other issue here. And that is the Hellenistic period. And so this is a little pre-Hellenistic, but this is like the height of classical Greek. And so we got the naturalism, not everything is fully defined, but then again, on any body, you hardly ever see all of the muscles at one time. You kind of start to figure this out, unless you're a bodybuilder, but that's why you do poses. Emphasize these muscles, those muscles, and so on. So the idea, the degree of naturalism is increasing, and this is 100 years after the Parthenon. And so Hermes and infant Dionysus. And this goes to what Xander was saying. Generations of gods. 3 generations, you said? Is that correct? Yes. And so, yeah, this depicts that. And the amount of clothing, I mean, the degree of realism in the drapery and so on. Want to point this out too. See that little bar? That's there, and the way this is made, it's all designed to support the weight. One of the things that they figured out and rediscovered during the Renaissance time is that when you sculpt from marble, if it's too top heavy, it'll break. And so without this support into the composition, the statue would break off right at the ankles. And so a lot of the classical sculptors have this. Renaissance sculptures are created this way. Sometimes there may be like a tree stump and something behind one of the legs or something, but it's really there to support. And so here we go, copy of a marble statue by Praxiteles, or an original work by grandson or son. So we, copying work, that was kind of accepted. And so on their pottery, you can, as I was saying, you can see what was important in their culture. This is really kind of a interesting crater. It's got the wide mouth and 2 handles, and it's kind of a smaller crater. But bottom line, we got the artist making sculpture, actually carving the marble. The tomb of Mausoleus, the mausoleum, when we talk about a mausoleum, this is the original. This is who it was named after. And it is in Turkey, modern day Turkey. Again, Greek influence was far and wide. There we go. Scraper. As we talk about all of the accomplishments and how you can kind of look at one area, you can look at their literature, know about military history, you can look at their pottery and know about other art forms. This is an excellent example of something that we learned about Greek life. It's a scraper. So you know what they did back in those days? They were very athletic, and they supported athletic competition. That was a big part of the culture, and mostly among men, and mostly the athletic competition, the men were in the nude. Well, we got the word gymnasium from that. Anyway, bottom line, what he's doing here is, I think, in some ways noteworthy. He's a scraper. So what athletes would do and the bodybuilders still do this, they oil themselves down. And then after the competition, they got rid of the oil by scraping it off their skin. That's what's happening right here. This guy is scraping the oil off of his arms. And so this is in Vatican in Rome. And again, see this tree stump there to support the weight? Because as I was saying, when you get much more naturalistic, you don't have the thick calves and the rigid placement of the feet to help support the sculpture. So again, weary Hercules, 320 BCE, right around the time, right when Alexander the Great died. And so what we call this period is the Hellenistic, and it maintains a high degree of naturalism, but it also starts to exaggerate. The idea of emotions really start to become front and center in this work. And so you can see weary Hercules, and so he's leaning on, he's tired. You can see he has all of the muscle. He's Hercules. He's strong. He's brave. Bottom line, he's tired here. And so, and head of Alexander the Great, we know that Alexander the Great was young, and this does depict young Alexander the Great. Detail. This is a mosaic, and it is a detail. One of the things that they actually invent too that we don't really see so much of before is mosaics. Now we see a lot of inlays in Greece and in Mesopotamia, but the idea of doing this with pebbles and things is a Greek invention. And we don't have many examples of Greek painting. And they invented here, they were a proponent of fresco. We know that Palace at Knossos has a lot of frescoes, but for some reason we don't really have too much in the way. This is a copy of the Alexander mosaic. And so we got these indicators that bottom line, their painting was probably as sophisticated as their architecture, as their sculpture, as their literature, and so on, and their mathematics. Here's that theater, as I was talking about, semicircular. It's kind of the model for how we view sporting events and plays and performances. Pretty much the same. Corinthian cabinet. This is the other order that emerges late in the classical period, a floral design on the capital. And yeah, all kinds of architecture here. This is what I'm kind of running a little short here. This is why I want to talk about the Hellenistic period. The idea of showing much more emotion. These people are in fear and in agony, and we think that this is a kind of an angelic figure that is probably showing some mercy. But from what we can gather from this, it doesn't stop at being anatomically correct. about emotions. It becomes actually in a lot of ways much more what we would call expressive. There we go. Gallic chieftain killing himself and his wife. Look at this. This is like, this is there to stir the emotions, and not just to impress you with strength. Started off with Hercules, the weary Hercules, and look how far we've come. Roman copy of a bronze statue, to be sure, but agony, defeat. I'm not going to let them take us alive. That moment, extreme crisis. And so compare the figures of the dying Gaul to the dying warriors we just saw. That was really about 200 years prior to this. We started looking at sculpture by looking at the dying Gaul today. And look at this guy. It's just like they're about 200 years apart. But you can see the advancement. And this is why the artists, I think even still today, but certainly for about 2,000 plus years, look back at classical Greek sculpture for inspiration. And the idea of conveying emotions, not just a simple representation, but actually a psychological effect on the viewer. And that is something that's really hard to move you, change your frame of mind. And so the Nike Samothrace, it's called Venus de Milo. See the way the clothing is, the arms are broke up. Venus de Milo. Milo is in Italy. The farmer found this. From his field and dug up this statue. And so anyway, late Hellenistic. But that's what was happening during the Italian Renaissance, was that there were people all around coming up with these beautiful statues, and their artists had no idea how to make this stuff. Aphrodite, Eros, and Pan. Aphrodite, Eros. Sleeping Eros. Eros, love God. In Roman mythology, in Roman religion, they call him Cupid, but it's sleeping Satyr. And so anyway, that's really what I want you to get out of Greece. We could spend an entire semester doing Greece. Spend an entire lifetime, kind of like Egypt, you know. As I said, I only talk about the high points and some of the indicators of how the style progresses and changes, and how it reflects the larger culture in which it was created. And so, with that being said, I want to move to this. And here. And this. Let me me make sure I got the screen share correct. Yes, that's good. So this is in the assignments, and I'm assigning this to you and due, what's the date, was it Monday? And so I want you to write 3 paragraphs. And write 3 paragraphs on one of the starred slides. And so if you take the PowerPoint and you kind of just open it and you leave all of the previous slides on the left side, you can easily pick out the starred ones. I did that quite deliberately. But they are the ones that, for the most part, you can find a lot of information on. And so a 3-paragraph essay, choose a star slide, except Pink Tutankhamun. Pink Tut has way too much information. So get lost in this. And so paragraph 1, identification of the artwork that is the subject of your essay, include all relevant information, the title and media and where it can be found, the size, and so on. Secondly, sampling of results. And what I want you to do, this is why we went over library resources the other day. I want you to look at the library resources and do articles, full text, peer review, just as I showed you. And I got this PowerPoint available. It's there still on Canvas. And I also have the video in the media gallery. But describe the interdisciplinary connections you found in your search results. So when you look at your search results, it will have subjects, and it might say chemistry, it may say Greek heritage or Greek history, it may say something about painting, it may say something about climate change, it may say something about a lot of different things, because you'll have presumably a large selection of sources. And all I really want you to do is describe the connections. And so it can be something quite as simple as I found an article on how climate change is affecting the Acropolis, some political history on the fight over the pediment sculptures from the Parthenon. It might be about the kind of pigments and the kind of analysis they use to figure out what color and how these things were painted, and so on and so on. A brief description is really all I need. Describe the interdisciplinary connections. But what I want you to do when you get that, copy the source and put it in your bibliography. So whatever journal it is, it's pretty easy to do. I'm not looking for format so much as I am being able to find what you were looking at. Interdisciplinary connections can be gathered from subjects listed in individual search results. And if you want to dig a little deeper, you can click on it and you might have an abstract. Some do, some don't, some call it a description. But at any rate, I want you to give me a sampling of the results, and I want it to be 1 paragraph. It's not a race to see how much you can find. What I want you to do is give me a range, and you don't have to give the entire range, but I want you to find the things that are connected to the art history. because everything we do in here, just to me, I read the book, we talk about this stuff, is just so interdisciplinary. You can't talk about the art without talking about the culture in which it was produced. But art touches almost every other discipline. ADAH actually, given some thought over the years of trying to put together an interdisciplinary course based on art, which could include in psychology, for example. How does the art make you feel? How is it made? We do chemistry and physics. We can do political history and yada, yada. Anyway, I want you to show me what you find, and then paragraph 3, give me one, pull out of that search one specific and detailed example, choose one of the search results, an article of interest to you from the abstract or the article. Describe the nature of interdisciplinary tools used in this specific article. And it could even be medicine. And I talked about not too common. There's a lot of medical research done on ancient Egyptian mummies. Medicine is a discipline, and DNA analysis is part of biochemistry and biophysics. And so anyway, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But give me just kind of put some meat on one of the bones that you find in this search. Describe the findings of the results of the article and summarize the new knowledge brought forth. And so if we were talking about DNA analysis, King Tut's mummy, there are people that say that that parts of King Tut's DNA can be found in people all over the world. Well, that's kind of cool. And so that's the sort of thing I want. And so endnotes, I said create a proper bibliographic format, but like I said, I'm going to ease that up. If you give me in your search results, cut and paste, that's actually pretty close to the bibliographic format anyway. So we didn't talk about that, but list them. And I want you to do it in a PDF or a docx, and it's available until the 27th, which is Monday at midnight, which means that we'll meet here on Monday. Got any last minute questions? We can talk about it. And so any questions? You always try to build in about 5 minutes at the end. You got a question? Yeah. Okay, let me show you here. I'll see if I can pull this up. And I got to make sure I got the right share. Share. And so when you look at the sources, you'll get something like this. And what I want you to do is to take your cut and paste right here. Well, I can't do this, it's a slide. This is your this goes in your bibliography. That right there. Like I say, it's almost in perfect bibliographic format anyway. But at any rate, this is subjects, boat, building, wooden boats, some Cheops and so on. non-destructive pro of the air. Subjects, Egyptian archaeology, excavation methods, planning, etc. But this one here would be your bibliography. Yes.
Does it get like alphabetical order?
No, just paste it. Yeah. Because I would talk about, that would be one of the differences, is that you would put that in alphabetical order by author, but don't worry about that. We'll get to that. I got a lot of things I want you to learn in this class, but I can't really expect that everybody will get everything all the time. So we're sort of walking through this. That was a good question. See you Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody.